Welcome back to episode 5 of the It's Coming podcast. I'm your host, Matt Gephardt, joined by my co-host, Noam Watt. The Huskies closed out 2020 with a commanding 82-61 win over the DePaul Blue Demons, spearheaded by a dazzling performance from Tyrese Martin.
That's right, Matt, but before we get to breaking down the DePaul game, we'll be joined by beat reporter Neill Ostrout, everybody's favorite tweeter. But before that, we start with promising rumors from a cook himself, who said in a Twitter video that he would be returning against Marquette tonight. But when asked at his pregame press conference on Zoom, Dan Hurley said he wasn't quite ready to say that a cook would play tonight.
He's getting closer. He's looking good. It's hard to give a timeline, but he's just because I don't want to put myself out there, but he's definitely getting closer. He looks good.
Anyways, now that we've gotten that Cook news out of the way, let's jump right in episode 5 of the It's Coming podcast.
Kemba Walker, step back, Walker, Cardiac Kemba! And the Huskies are the top dog in 2011. El Amin comes over and says, we shocked the world. Bounce, up ahead to Bouknight, to the rim, and a ball!
People better get us now. That's all. You better get us now, because it's coming.
And now we're joined by a special guest covering the team for the Journal Inquirer. Neill Ostrout joins the podcast. Neill, thanks so much for joining us on the last regular season NFL Sunday. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
So, Neill, let's start just first things first, hearing a little bit about the game day atmosphere inside Gampel Pavilion. Now, obviously, it's very limited. There's only like 12 media members and very limited personnel. And unfortunately, nobody from UCTV is allowed in. So we'd just like to hear a little bit about sort of what the game day routine looks like and what it's like being there in an empty arena.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very odd for us. I mean, in terms of like the media, I mean, we come in through the door and walk up the stairs and sit in the little plexiglass hockey box media section and don't move for, 4 hours. That's pretty much it. So the game day experience is probably, I don't want to say it's better on television screens or, a little more informative, but it is what it is. It's COVID. There's not much you can do. Everybody's separated, everybody's distanced and masked, and it's, it's safe and it's good. It's not the greatest environment to watch or report on a basketball game, but, there are more important things, I guess, these days. And like you said, for the limited fans, family members and stuff, I think it's, it's enjoyable and, who doesn't want to see their brother, son, et cetera, play, but it's got to be different even for the fans. I mean, couple cheers here and there is pretty much it. It's almost dead silent except for the like wind-aided crowd noise that they got pumping through. Even the benches are loud to some degree, but that's not too much. It's an odd scenario, odd setting all around. Starting to get used to it after a few games, but obviously it's completely different what everybody's used to.
So how much of Dan Hurley are you able to hear? Because obviously going into the season, everybody was all psyched up, quiet crowd. We're going to hear every word he says, and then we haven't really heard much on TV.
Yeah, not much. I mean, you catch a word here and there, really well-timed, unmasked, explicit, expletive here and there. But for the most part, nah, you can't hear much of what he's saying.
That's frustrating.
Yeah, hey, one of the other major perils of COVID, like important ones,
Neill, obviously throughout the season, there's been a lot of different things going on. There was a lot of different storylines going in. I mean, you could pick and choose. You could just pick COVID. You could pick what players are going to score, all this, all that, a lot of different unknowns. So far, what has impressed you the most about this team? What has been the most surprising, be that a player or a thing about the team? And what's been your overall takeaways versus your own expectations for the team going in?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone knew this was kind of Bouknight's team, but even the ease at which he's kind of taken the reins and taken over, it's been pretty impressive. I mean, almost 90% from a scoring standpoint, but even from like a leadership standpoint, even a little bit defensively, I think he's gotten better on that end too. But that was to some degree it was expected. I think how well-rounded and impressive Tyrese Martin has been so far has impressed me a little bit, surprised me a little bit. I mean, obviously we knew he could do a lot of different things, but he's really shown it. I mean, rebounding, scoring. Defensively, he's been great. I watched him a little bit, in the last year and a half, 2 years, and I knew he was pretty athletic, but he's really impressed. Dunks aside, he's got a couple impressive ones of those, but an extremely athletic player that, maybe I underestimated a little bit. Maybe that's why I'm surprised. Maybe I shouldn't be. He's played at a reasonably high level already. Obviously, Dan Hurley's liked him for years, even though he never really played for him. But yeah, I'd say a little bit of surprise. Maybe even how well they've rebounded too. Obviously this is a big team, with some veteran front court guys and some huge freshman front court guys. So maybe that shouldn't be too much of a surprise, but it really rebounded a little better than I thought they would.
I think going off of your first point about Bouknight, what's been most impressive for me is just how much more assertive he is within the offense. Last year, there were stretches where he would do nothing, or it was like almost lazy offense. But now, he's constantly running off-ball screens, freeing himself open for threes, using high picks outside the three-point line and taking it to the rim and getting fouled. He's just so much more involved in the offense, and it feels like it's going to translate so much more to the NBA game versus last year where we saw the raw talent and the potential, but we didn't necessarily see such a fine-tuned offensive game. Now, what we did see last year was the sheer athleticism, and it took a little while for us to get a signature James Bouknight dunk this year, but in that game against DePaul, got out on the fast break, threw down a windmill. It was number 1 on SportsCenter top 10 the next morning. Neill, out of 10, if you're a dunk contest judge, what do you rate that dunk? And where does it stand for you in recent memory of UConn dunks?
Ooh, good one. I would say it's let's give it a 9.4. Pretty impressive. I actually thought the steal was almost more impressive before the dunk. Behind the back, just to steady himself and not even come close to losing control or going out of bounds. That was impressive. In the pantheon of UConn dunks in recent years, maybe depending on how far back we go, the late Stanley Robinson now, I would say it's maybe a step under 2 of his best. But no, obviously he's incredibly athletic. It was great that, Martin has the dunk right before, which was impressive in its own right. And Bouknight sort of said, yeah, that was nice and all, but here's what it really looks like. It was pretty impressive.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people were talking on Twitter sort of like how crazy Gamble would have gone then. It was a chance for the first Big East win. They were up like 18 and then they go up 22 with those 2 dunks. The place the top would have blown off. So that sort of transitions into the next question, just, basketball in the COVID era. And obviously they're playing with no fans, and yet they've still had 2 COVID-related shutdowns, a couple of positives within the program. So I just sort of want to get your thoughts on how do you think the rest of the season can be played? Their next 3 games are on the road. We've seen a lot of UConn fans on Twitter criticizing the Big East for not having a better system in place for setting up new games after postponements. So just sort of what are your thoughts on the rest of the season?
Yeah, obviously everything's unprecedented and there's no easy answers. A lot of people talk, why don't they do a bubble? I think that's really tough with college kids, keeping them away for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, even, that's even on semester break. I think that's a little rough. To get 20 league games in for every team, I think that's going to be awful hard too. I would be shocked if the league plays all of its games. There's going to be some, just odd standings where one team has played 3 more games than another, and you just have to live with it. There's really not much you can do. And I think, it was a good idea leaving when they put the schedule out, not originally, but the most recent version of the league schedule, leaving weeks open for reschedules. I think you kind of have to do that. As we saw with St. John's just yesterday, last minute cancellations are going to happen and last minute changes are going to have to be made. And I think, it's tough for some coaches because, they want to get all the games in, but if the league comes to you and says, well, do you want to play 4 games this week to catch up? Most coaches are going to say, no, heck no. My guys can't do that. But on the other hand, you want to experience the full round robin, and you don't want to lose, like maybe you're losing a home game to, there's not really an also ran or a lesser team in the league, but to someone you think you can beat. And you almost have to say, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to take the road game at Villanova, which, on paper, you're taking an L there when you can get an easy win, or not an easy win, but a reasonably easy win. So it's just incredible headaches for everybody involved. And I'm it's an unenviable spot for a coach and for a school, a program, whatever, to have to kind of pick and choose sometimes. But I think they may end up having to do that by the end of the season. You're basically going to say, which of these games do we want to play even? Because say you've played 15 games with a week and a half left in the season. What are you going to do?
Yeah,
I don't know. I can create all the problems. I can't solve them.
Yeah, and they, the Big East did try to set up having those weeks where they said this is going to be a makeup week. But like you said, if UConn misses so many games that they're going to tell UConn, all right, you're going to play 4 games this week, it's not really a situation you want to be in. And then you had, Villanova just got put on pause, and yesterday they would have had a game against Xavier, and a lot of people, people were saying like, oh, UConn should jump in and play Xavier. But like you said, like it's not that easy, and you have to really kind of pick and choose your games. But UConn's next game is against Marquette. Marquette has had kind of a weird year because they had wins against Wisconsin and they had a win against Creighton, but they're coming off an ugly win over Georgetown, previously losing their last 3. They've got 4 players in double digits. They've got Dawson Garcia. What's it going to take to beat Marquette?
Well, I mean, at first glance, you'd say, well, a road win there would be terrific. But I mean, how much is a road win really anymore? We've talked a lot about it. Yeah, the travel's a pain, and there's going to be all kinds of logistics and that kind of stuff. But in terms of the atmosphere of the game and the crowd noise, and a lot of people have said it, referees' tendencies. I mean, we're all human, and I think most officials in the league are pretty good. But you have a tendency to play to the crowd or play to the home coach or whatever. You always get a little questionable call is going to go the home team's way. You're not really seeing that, at least from what I've seen in games in the league this year and games around the country. So, is the door more open for a team like UConn that's, I don't know, relatively evenly matched with Marquette, maybe a little better, but playing on the road, is that kind of discounted these days? And it's a lot more of an even playing field. I tend to think so. And obviously, the up and down nature of Marquette is obviously lends itself to who knows what you're going to get. But I think Steve Wojciechowski is a pretty good coach. So I think he'll have his guys ready and maybe refocused after kind of a lackluster couple weeks here.
So Neill, Marquette is 51 in KenPom. UConn's 38. How much of a KenPom guy are you?
I mean, a little bit. I must confess I did not subscribe this year, which is, terrible. I know. I should be whipped and punished severely. But yes, I do most years pretty much adhere to that as the Bible. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, KenPom's kind of fun to follow, but in the end of the day, like, who knows if the selection committee is really going to look at it. But like you talked about these road games, like, yeah, they're road games, but the atmosphere is no different. It's not any more of a challenge. And for UConn, like, they haven't hopped on a plane yet. They've been home for the first 2 months of the season, basically. Most of these guys probably haven't traveled since the start of the pandemic, except to go home and come back to stores. So there might be a little bit of energizing factor. Maybe they'll come out a little bit juiced up, or even a little bit, nervous or just out of control, because playing on the road for the first time, it'll be different. Obviously they had the one game at Mohegan Sun, but that was just a drive. So looking forward, we're expecting a Cook to come back sometime in the next handful of games, probably within the next 2 weeks, we think, barring any more setbacks. So with Adama Sanogo being a little bit less of a factor in the last couple of games, only 7 minutes against DePaul, what do you think a Cook's addition will bring to this team? Obviously, he's a tremendous shot blocker. There were games last year where guys just wouldn't shoot against him, but how do you see his addition, helping Dan Hurley's squad?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good problem to have, but you look at the minutes and you look at the roster and you say, where does he fit in? And that, I mean, again, that's not the worst thing for a coach to face. Like, I have too many good guys. I have tough choices. But yeah, whose minutes does he eat? I mean, obviously, I would assume Sanogo plays a little bit less. Tyler Polley's working his way back in, but maybe he plays a little less. I mean, it's kind of hard. You can't, it's hard to sit any of your fives if you're going to play really small and play a Cook at the 5 somehow. I mean, Whaley, foul trouble recently aside, you really can't sit, and Josh Carlton's coming on. So, you're probably looking at a Cook making a very big lineup, which is, again, a positive, but then, you got to eat minutes somewhere else. And, like I said, it's not the worst problem in the world for a coach to have. And if Cook is even remotely close to what he was last year, such a defensive presence, you'd really be silly not to get him on the court as much as possible. And I think it's, we haven't been able to obviously see how much, his offense has progressed, even with rehab or whatever. But I would bet that he's been working hard, and, he was a reasonable jump shooter last year. Who knows? He may be the weapon that, Tyler Polley was. Maybe if he shows the, improved shooting touch, I mean, he's a guy who can be a real threat. Both ends.
Yeah, and a Cook's defense is something I can't wait to have back. Me and Noam, a lot of times sitting in the student section when a Cook was playing and the other team had the ball and they would pass it to whoever a Cook was guarding and he would pass it right away. And me and Noam I would always point out, I'd be like, you see that? They don't even want to try it. So greatly missed. Can't wait to have him back. We touched on a little bit earlier about secondary scoring on this team. And I want to ask you, do you think Tyrese Martin can be the guy over RJ Cole? RJ has been talked a lot about the secondary scorer. Is it reasonable to entertain the idea that Tyrese could be it instead? RJ's been a little more consistent, but Tyrese did just have a 22-point game. Tyrese is also just short of averaging a double-double on the season.
Yeah. I mean, there's no rule that says you have to pick one. I mean, if they both average exactly, 11.89 points per game, I think, Dan Hurley would live with that. No, I mean, I think certainly Tyrese Martin could. Certainly he's got the ability. He gets a lot of tough points. You don't want to call them easy points, but his offensive rebounding ability, his putback ability really gives him a chance to contribute a lot. Especially offensively, to give Book a little lift. Obviously not the shooter that RJ Cole is. I know RJ Cole's had a tough game here and there, but he's a very good shooter. And it's shocking to me, just as a quick aside, how many teams already don't realize he's left-handed. I mean, he gets to the basket so easily with his left hand. He's got a pretty good right hand too, but silly coaching or players a little forgetful. They shade him to the wrong side. Anyways, I think it's still RJ Cole's job to lose per se. If you're saying who is the number 2 option, I still think he's such an established scorer, even though it was at a different level, and he's such a talent that he'll probably end the season as the number 2 scorer. But Martin's certainly not far behind, and certainly wouldn't shock me if they kind of flip-flopped a little bit.
I'm going to go off cuff a little bit, Matt. I know I didn't write this down, but what do you think about Hurley's, management of the rotation so far? We haven't necessarily seen Jalen Gaffney play, up to what he did at the end of last season. He's sort of the backup point guard role. Brandon Adams has been up and down a little bit. Before Andre Jackson's injury, he really was a non-factor. So it's really been like the Bouknight, Martin, RJ Cole, and Isaiah Whaley show for the most part. But what do you think about, guys 5 through 9 and how Dan Hurley has been managing his rotation?
Well, I mean, I think it's silly and it's simple, but you play your best guys. I mean, you can nitpick a little bit on, who should be getting a little few extra minutes here and there, but you play the guys that are playing well. And from looking at it from afar, it seems that in a Dan Hurley team, in a Dan Hurley system, if you're not picking it up defensively, then it doesn't really matter what you're doing on offense. There's a few guys, mostly freshmen, but even upperclassmen who, if you look lost defensively on a possession or two, that's it. You know what I mean? Have a seat, think about it, work on it, whatever. And whatever we lose offensively, this is Dan. He's not going to worry about. He's going to say, if you can give me, maybe Isaiah Whaley before he became an offensive threat was still so valuable because of that. And he's obviously it's a little bit apples and oranges. You're not going to sit a guy who's a 20-point scorer because he can't play defense, maybe. But if it's close, it's always going to go to the guy who is in better defensive position, better defensive awareness, has the ability to stop his guy a lot more than a guy who can get a hot hand every now and again. So I think that's how you see the rotation and the minutes kind of divvying up. Some of it's obviously pre-planned and, they have schedules and, we got to get this guy, a rest at the under 8 and, this guy's going to come in for a few minutes here and there. But during the flow of the game, during, the last second, the quick decisions, it's almost always seems to rest on a defensive decision. If like Sonogo has been terrific in certain stretches, but he was obviously a little bit lost defensively in the DePaul game. And I think that kind of sat him for a while. And I think we see that pattern kind of going over and over again.
And, one thing that I don't think Dan Hurley has necessarily gotten enough credit for this year is the game plan against the opponent's star players. It started with Evan Mobley for USC, who, the Huskies really just locked down. And then it was Marcus Zagorowski, who had, pretty much a paltry game. RJ Cole's defense on him was just suffocating. Bouknight way outshined him. And then against DePaul, it was Charlie Moore, who was very inefficient, just 4 of 12. So, like you said, the defense for Dan Hurley is what's going to drive his rotations.
Yeah, they've been what Jim Calhoun used to call it cutting off the head of the snake or whatever. If you can limit the other team's best guy to even if he scores 10 or 12 points, if he does it on 18, 20 shots, you'll take that. Try and limit the damage that the superstar can do to you. And they've done a great job of that so far. Like I said, obviously defensive focused and defensive minded for a lot of these matchups. But no, I think part of that is individual offenders. Obviously, RJ Cole, as much as we talked about, maybe a little bit inconsistent with shooting, he's been terrific the defensive end. And in recent years, somewhat pre-Dan Hurley and maybe a little bit into his Dan's first year, perimeter defense was really rough. And, UConn guards had a hard time staying in front of their guy. Christian Vitale is a good example. I mean, I think he improved so much until by the time he left, he was terrific. But even he and, Jalen Adams and a few others didn't always have the greatest, defensive position or, would let guys get by them, maybe a little too much. And I think that's really changed, certainly in the last, year and a half, too.
Yeah, and I think that in the coming games and weeks, we're going to see more of that. Better defensive positioning will lead to more steals and runouts. Both those Martin and Bouknight steals were because of good defense, and it leads to dunks. And then that's when the athleticism of this team is going to shine. They're going to get more coverage on, pages like Bleacher Report and, Fox College Sports on Twitter. So just a little bit more excitement. So Neill, our last question is just, you have a bit of a fascination with the stand until they score tradition on Twitter.
Yes, I do.
It's duly noted. Matt dug through a little bit, did some research. And the other day you tweeted it and RJ Cole's mom responded. And
that's hilarious.
I just want to ask you a little bit about what it's like to be on Twitter as a beat reporter and sort of what's different about just having parents and family there and sort of how that plays into your coverage of the team.
Yeah. I mean, obviously anyone who follows me or knows me, I try and have fun. I'm try to be the least mean-spirited, but yet the most entertaining I can. And by entertaining, I mean, if I entertain myself, then that's good enough for me, frankly. No, I mean, I'm half kidding. No, and I like to have fun with the stand until they score thing. Oftentimes, in recent years, because, you can go 3, 4, and 5 minutes before some UConn teams would score. But I was watching the other night and about, I don't know, what was there, 21 maybe fans in there, 24. I would say 11 were standing, something like that, by my quick math. So I called it out. I know, terrible of me. But, and it's fun. And, RJ Cole's mom, I don't really know her. I'm sure she's a wonderful woman. And she was standing. Yes, we can attest to that. But yeah, it's always a little touchy. I don't want to insult. I'm not trying to mess around, with family members or anything like that. I do it all in fun. And if people want to poke fun at me, I certainly don't mind. I have fun back. It's all good. And hopefully, but now, see, for the rest of the season, those family members who are not standing, now they might know. So,
now they know.
Yeah, public service.
Neill, thanks so much for joining us today on the podcast. It's always great following your stuff and reading, and it's a bummer that we can't all be together at these games and the post-game media scrums, but we wish you the best. Hope you stay safe. Enjoy the rest of the season, and we will talk soon. So thanks again.
It does stink, and thank you guys. Hopefully, see you soon in person, not just via radio and Zoom and whatnot. But it's great. Thanks, guys.
You bet.
Thanks, Neill. And a big thanks again for Neill for joining us. And now we're going to jump into looking at the DePaul game and breaking it down a little bit. I'm just going to share my opening thoughts. First off, right off the bat, the Huskies again struggled at the start. It was a 4-4 game heading into the U16 timeout. That's been a very common occurrence for this team the past few seasons. However, I mean, it seems like it's simple. It just takes them 5-10 minutes to get their feet under them, and then eventually they get off and running. Happened against Creighton, and it happened here again versus DePaul. Kind of hard to blame the team, though, when you go 10 days without playing a game. And again, Creighton, they went how many days? 16, something like that, without playing a game. So I don't want to really put too much blame on them. There's only so much you can do. The good news is DePaul, man, is not good. So the slow start didn't really hurt the Huskies too bad. The team shot 41% from 3, 5 for 8 in the first half. That is badly needed, especially coming off the Creighton game. The numbers are even better if you take out the fact that Bouknight went 0 for 4. Additionally, speaking of Bouknight, Another game where he outperforms a guard chosen to the Big East preseason first team. Okay, last game it was Zagorowski, and he put up 40 points. Now Charlie Moore is the new victim. Moore only put up 8 points on 12 field goal attempts to Bouknight's 20 on 13. What's even better is that Hurley called this a C-plus performance from James Bouknight.
And what's even worse for Charlie Moore is that he looks like he's 12 years old. So not only did he do nothing, but he looks like he's a middle schooler.
That is your analysis. My last thought here. I just want to touch on some other players and spotlight them real quick. RJ Cole had a nice bounce back game. Landed some tough finishes driving to the lane. I mean, there were some beautiful floaters in there. He's got a really great left hand, and as Neill pointed out, it seems like some teams just don't realize he's a lefty. Good for us. Additionally, I want to give a quick little spotlight to Carlton. Grabs himself his first double-double of the season coming off the bench. I'm going to talk a little bit more about him later, but he made an immediate impact in this game when they needed him to. 4 rebounds in his first 4 minutes. Noam, what were your opening thoughts about this game?
Yeah, UConn has been very impressive on the boards early this season. They were plus 10 rebounding margin against DePaul. It's huge for them. Obviously, they're a bigger team, which Neill talked about, which really helps them. And Tyrese Martin, leading rebounder in the conference. Yeah, it's early, but that's a trend that we're going to see. He's going to grab 8 to 10 boards a game. Bouknight, a big guard, is going to grab 4 to 6. Speaking of Bouknight, he's so dominant within the offense, and it's effortless almost. He plays just so much more mature and more of a professional style than he did last year. He uses off-ball screens. He's constantly moving. He knows how to use on-ball screens and take it to the hoop. He's become a very efficient shooter and great finisher around the rim. He just really, he commands so much more attention, and that frees up other guys so much more as well.
Yeah, and any worry about him and the idea that last year Christian Vital was carrying the load, and now it would kind of be on Bouknight, who could kind of be an inconsistent scorer by the half. And like you said, he's really taking control, and he looks super comfortable out there, and he's also leading the conference in scoring.
It's not bad. Scoring leader and rebounding leader in the Big East. We'll take that. Next takeaway, the Brennan Adams, Jalen Gaffney, RJ Cole lineup is brutal. They just get out there and they look totally discombobulated. The ball doesn't really move. They turn it over. They don't score much. The second team rotation is something Dan Hurley's got to figure out. With the addition of a Cook, it'll help a little bit. He's a guy who can score both inside and out. We didn't necessarily see it a lot during his freshman season, but I think we'll see it more this year. But that Brennan, Gaffney, and RJ Cole lineup it really struggles. Now, my last main takeaway is UConn's defense is really ratcheting it up. As Neill talked about, if you don't play defense on a Dan Hurley team, you just won't play. It doesn't really matter how good your offense is. DePaul only shot 38%, and if you hold teams under 40%, you're going to win a heck of a lot of ball games. So moving on to our next segment, this one is one of the easier ones so far this season. Matt, who's your MVP of the week?
The MVP, no contest. It's going to be Tyrese Martin. Had himself a double-double, 22 points, 10 rebounds, split those 5 offensive, 5 defensive. Also drained 2 3-pointers. I mean, yeah, he was scoring from all over the court, in the post, on the drive. From 3, he was perfect from the line. You really can't ask more of that from a guy like him, especially he's just such a high motor guy. He's, he kind of like a Cook. You notice him on both sides of the ball. Aggressive like Bouknight going to the rim, man. He's not afraid to catch a body either, and sums it up by getting selected to the Big East weekly honor roll.
And one thing that's really impressed me about Tyrese is his ability to finish with his left hand through contact. He's done it since the first game he played in, and he does it efficiently, and, it's sort of unexpected. He goes to the rim hard with his left hand, and he just goes up and finishes over guys. And so that's, Tyrese is going to really have to keep it up. Hurley said at his media availability pregame, he said, this can't just be a one-hit wonder for Tyrese. He's got to be consistent. He's got to put up 18 points a game or, 14 to 18 range and really be that second scorer, because there are nights when RJ Cole's going to struggle. And then there will obviously and ultimately be nights when Tyrese Martin struggles. So those two guys really got to carry the load behind James Bouknight.
Yeah, and Hurley putting that on him. And, Tyrese talked a lot preseason, during the season, about why he's here and what he wants to accomplish, and certainly putting him in that role. It's been really great. And like we said, Neill I asked Neill what he thinks about Tyrese as maybe the secondary scorer, and like Neill said, it doesn't have to be one guy. They could switch off, but certainly Tyrese putting in what he needs to do. Next up, we are going to move on to play of the week. Arguably might be just as easy. Noam, what do you think for play of the week?
Yeah, so Neill gave this play, it was a 9.4 out of 10. And knowing
He's a
Neill
stingy guy.
Ostrout, he's pretty picky, so that's pretty good. The play of the week has got to be the James Bouknight windmill dunk. It was a SportsCenter top 10 play, number 1 the next morning. But equally as impressive was the steal and the behind the back to get himself on the break. That was smooth. That was like Jif peanut butter. That was that smooth. I mean, James Bouknight on the fast break is a thing of beauty. It's even better when a guy like Precious Achiuwa is trying to block him and Bouknight jams all over his face. But I'll take a windmill any day of the week.
You know what's great about that? Like you said, the steal and the behind the back was almost or arguably just as nice. And I was watching that game with my dad, and as soon as he got that ball and put it behind his back, I said, "Dad, you got to watch this. This guy's going to do something special with this ball." Yeah. Next, we're going to move to under the radar. For me, we already mentioned Bouknight versus Charlie Moore, so now I want to talk about shutting down a different guy, and that's Romeo Weems. 33 minutes, and he was held to just 6 points on 3 of 8 shooting when he was just coming off a 21-point performance versus Providence. Hurley, high praise in the press conference. Noam, what was your under-the-radar player or thing of the week?
Yeah, quick note off yours is that UConn's done a great job of shutting down opponents' best players. They did it with Evan Mobley, they did it with Marcus Zagorowski, and now they did it with Romeo Weems and the 12-year-old Charlie Moore. But my under-the-radar thing of the week, I guess you could say, is James Bouknight putting up 20 points with so little effort. He is so good at this point in his career in college that he can get a 20-piece whenever he wants to. It's like going to McDonald's at the drive-thru late at night and asking for a 20-piece and, you get it. Like, that's James Bouknight right now. He is the best player in the Big East, arguably going to be an All-American and a lottery pick come the 2021 NBA draft. Let's move on to our next segment, which is our hot take or overreaction of the week. Matt, your scalding hot take. Let's hear it.
Yeah, it's a hot take / prediction for this next game, and that is that the Huskies will hold Dawson Garcia to 5 points. I've got faith. Now, I wrote this in when it looked like a Cook was definitely playing. Now we don't really know. He might not. Either way, I'm just going to say it. We'll hold him to 5 points. If they don't, well, that sucks. But I am drinking the Kool-Aid. Josh Carlton, you don't want to play him when he's angry. Isaiah Whaley, maybe, come on, man, a bounce-back game for him. Sonogo as well. He was a little quiet, but he's a big guy. I think he might be maybe a little mad that he wasn't picked as freshman over Dawson. Just kidding, but I'm looking forward to see the Huskies shut him down and get a win. Noam, what about you?
Yeah, my hot take is that UConn's going to sweep this upcoming road trip. Now, being at a COVID season, it could be a one-game road trip. Wouldn't surprise me. But if they go 1-0, that's a sweep. But no, I think that UConn is going to take all 3 games. They face Marquette tonight, and then it's Butler and then DePaul. Huskies will travel from Butler to DePaul on the bus, but this is a huge opportunity for 3 wins. It's a great chance to increase the team chemistry on the road. And plus, if UConn manages to sweep these 3, they would come into a potential ranked matchup against Villanova at 7-1. That game, COVID pending due to Villanova's program right now, would be on January 15th. But my hot take, UConn's going to sweep this road trip. It would be 3 big wins for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And now we're going to move on to Get 'em next time. Noam, I'll let you go first for this. Who do you have, or what do you have for Get 'em next time?
Yeah, go get him next time to all the referees who call these bogus fouls on Isaiah Whaley. I mean, these are ridiculous. Like, he can't even put a finger on a guy and get away with nothing. He's getting called for all sorts of fouls. But no, for real, foul trouble for Isaiah Whaley has been a little uncharacteristic of late. He fouled out last game. Actually, he didn't foul out last game. He just got in foul trouble. He fouled out against Creighton. But he's got to get back.
I think he did foul out. He did foul out. He did.
Oh, okay. Well, sources say he
twice
did
in a row.
foul out. So that's 2 in a row for him. But he's just got to get back to his reliable self. And Hurley talked about it, how playing with no fans has been tough for Whaley. He's really an energy guy, but he's also a glue guy for this team. And he's just got to get back to the basics, and really ratcheting up his own intensity will be good for him. And I'm expecting a great week from the senior this week.
Yeah, and before we get to my pick, I just want to talk about I just want to expand on that a little bit. Yeah, he's huge for this team down the stretch. So, like you said, uncharacteristic, man, and you need him in these final minutes. He fouled out against Creighton, and it obviously hurt them in overtime. He fouled out in this game. 2 illegal screens. That's unlike him. He is really good at the pick and roll on offense and at guarding it. Like, we always talk about how great he is hedging. Yeah, you need him to keep the fouls down. For me, get him next time. It's Adama Sanogo. He started the game, but he ended up only playing 7 minutes and scoring 2 points, which came in the garbage time last minute of the game. It was interesting to hear Hurley talk about starting over Josh. He said, man, Josh had a really good week in practice, but Adama was just a little better. So it's just interesting to see Adama did get that start, but his play just couldn't keep up. And he went out to say, Hurley touched on Adama being a little lost out there, and that's a combination of a kid being a freshman. That's also a combination with COVID. So Josh gets his early opportunity off the bench, took it, and ran. Now we are going to throw it to the Hurley Juice moment of the week from head coach Dan Hurley himself. Here it is.
It was just nice to pull into a city and get out on the road together as a group. Get on a plane and I think it's gonna be really good for just the chemistry and I think the mental state of the group too. It's like we played a game the other day. We're getting another game today. We look like we've got a series of games coming up and hopefully practices, and we just get some consistency.
Thanks for tuning in to episode 5 of the It's Coming podcast. UConn with a road trip, their first of the season. Tonight they take on Marquette, 9 p.m. on FS1. Saturday they play at the very historic Hinkle Fieldhouse, taking on the Butler Bulldogs. That's at 4 p.m. on CBS Sports Network. And Monday, 6 p.m., they take on DePaul University, 6 p.m. FS1. See if UConn can give them another 20-piece. But special shout-out to Neill Ostrout. For Mac Epford, I'm Noam Watt. Have a good one, everybody. Go Huskies.